live and recorded, just preparing.
Morning, Ros.
Morning.
Thank you, Chairman. We are streaming and recording now.
Right, good. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this audit and governance meeting on the Wednesday, 27th of May, 2020. It's historic ground for us. We are now doing Zoom meetings, which is a bit of a challenge to us all, I think, especially those of us who aren't totally technically minded. But I think if we take our time and go at it a bit at a time, we'll get there. So we'll start the proceedings with a record of attendance. Elaine, do you want to do a roll?
Yes, can do, Chairman. Thank you. If I'm just going to call your names out, and if you could indicate whether you're present, thank you. Councillor Paul Hibbert-Greaves.
Here.
Councillor Will Grover. He sent his apologies. Councillor David Andrews.
Here.
Councillor Adrian Benjamin.
Go on.
Councillor Adrian Benjamin. Councillor Benjamin, could you confirm your presence, please?
Elaine, he's on mute.
Oh, Councillor Ben, let me just unmute him. Councillor Benjamin, could you just confirm your presence, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Right. There we
go. Councillor Colin Davey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ros Jackson.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Terry Knowles.
He's on mute.
Councillor Terry Knowles.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Jimmy Brooks is an apology. George Kravich.
Here.
And Walter Lashenko.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for the record of attendance.
Right. Item number 2, disclosures of interest, if any, or any we don't throw it in now. I don't suppose anybody has any, have they?
Councillor Hibbert.
Yes.
Yes, I've just got 2 I'd like to declare. I don't think there's any conflict. I'm also a member of the audit committee of the Grimsby Institute Tech Partnership and a University Council member of the Bishop Crossett University in Lincoln. I don't believe there'll be any conflict of interest.
Is the monitor officer happy with that?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chairman. I don't see any conflict on the business that's on the agenda today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, we'll proceed to the minutes of the last meeting. Have we all had a chance to read them, and are we happy with the content? Yep.
Yes.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say,
Yes.
Chairman, that whilst I wasn't at that meeting, and obviously it's a factual record of what took place at the meeting, I think the minutes do raise some issues in light of that meeting taking place in January and where we are today at the end of May in relation to pages 8, in particular around investments. Obviously, the situation will have changed considerably in the last few weeks in relation to values and particularly around commercial property and retail. So I think the committee is going to need to have a COVID impact paper, I think, to look at in terms of impact on investments and on the committee's work for the next meeting.
Okay, we can take that on board. Yep.
Yeah.
But apart from that, are we happy with the minutes? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a proposer and seconder, please, Chairman.
I'll propose the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Right, moving on. Item number 4. There is no chairman's update at the moment, so we'll go on to item number 5, the action sheet, which I do believe is, let's check my notes. I believe that's all been actioned on, if I'm correct. Perhaps the Monitor Office will let me know.
Councillor Hibbert-Greaves, we've got 2 hands up.
Oh, right, hang on, what have we got? Councillor Jackson.
For the actions on page 15, action 53, we've got quite a lot of we've got mention of the county council financial robustness, and I think it's reasonable to say that that's now obsolete in terms of the situation that all county and district councils are in at the moment. And also the second point is the M&G meeting obviously hasn't gone ahead. Can we ask M&G for a written statement in terms of the position of property funds? Because I think it's quite a concern. It's not just the retail that we need to be worried about. It's obviously the situation with offices. They're going to have a better idea than we do about the valuation of that.
We can do that, can't we? Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And George?
Thank you, Chairman. It may be my ignorance, but on item 52, there were various reports back due. I couldn't see any of them on the agenda, and I wonder if they were going to be done by verbally updating the committee. If you actually look at the actual numbers, there were officers, the section 1.5 officer to provide clarification, provide information, etc. I wonder when are we going to receive that?
Can anybody enlighten me on that one?
I'm fairly certain. Sorry.
Sorry, I think what Adrian's going to say is that there was an email sent around, but it was quite some time ago in response to that. It was probably me. Adrian maybe forwarded it on to me. I will dig it out, but I'm fairly sure there was an email response to those points raised. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been ticked off as completed. If you leave that one with me.
I'm getting old, Chairman, I know that, but I don't recall that. So
right, I'll dig it out and I'll send it on to.
I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say, Chair.
Sorry, Adrian.
That's all right.
Walter, have you got?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I was trying to map through an action. It was action 55. On page 16 of the action list. That also referred to a comment about the affordability of the Horncastle project and the fact that it would be entered onto the risk register. I was trying to put second bullet on page 12 of the minutes. We can obviously look at this at the last item, which is the risk position statement, but I couldn't quite map the words across. I could see no explicit reference to the Horncastle project, but I'm happy to take this when we review the risk management statement. I just want to make the point that I don't think it's quite resolved here in my view.
Right, so should we bring that up at the risk management at the end?
I'm happy to do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll make a note of that then and we'll bring it up. Right, no more questions I can see. So we'll move on again then to item number 6, Audit and Governance Committee Annual Report 2019-2020. And I think that's Mr. John Armstrong. Is that right, John?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is just a very brief report for noting for the committee. This is just seen as really good practice to have an annual report of the work that's been undertaken by the Audit and Governance Committee. It sets out at Appendix A what the committee has actually undertaken in that period, which is fairly what I would just like to point out is a couple of apologies. I wrote it again. Sorry. I mean, we had a very busy year, as you can tell from Appendix A. That's everything that's been achieved. We've also seen the appointment of 2 new independent members, which is a very positive thing for this particular committee. That again is seen as good practice to have more than one independent member. We're very fortunate. We have 2 very good independent members. And that's positive, I think. There was achieved last year. I take the point about the property funds that's been raised, and obviously we've had some training on that over previous years. And people come in to give talks. There was one due for the March meeting, but unfortunately that was cancelled for obvious reasons. But that's maybe something that we might want to pick up into this year going forward. But other than that, unless there's any questions from members, this will go to Council ultimately just to reflect on the work of the Audit and Governance Committee. As I say, it is good practice, and that's the purpose behind doing this. And so, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Are we all happy with that?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I did raise my hand, but it may have made
Sorry,
escape me, but
I keep. You have to bear with me. I'm trying to look at 2 different things at once here, and
I think you have to look at 4 things at once with this particular way of doing things.
It's not come up. Anyway, please, Walter. Yeah.
Yeah, please, John. Thank you very much for that update. And I know that quite the meat of everything is going to be in the following documentation, but I did just wonder, and it's more food for thought, and it's certainly not a criticism, but when I read the list and documentation that we have to look at, it's quite comprehensive. But I was wondering if we were missing a trick here in terms of an annual report, which not just looks at the documentation that we've looked at, but maybe perhaps assesses how well we did, what we learned and achieved, and what we're going to do differently going forward. Now, this may be covered elsewhere, and you'll have to forgive my ignorance on this, John, but I'm wondering whether we can make it a value-added document rather than a list of documents we've looked at. It's by no means a criticism, and I know we have to populate these documents, but I'm happy to discuss that perhaps at another time.
I think that's a valid challenge, to be honest, Walter. I think that that is something that we can look at in future. I think when I completed it, I must admit, with other priorities at the moment.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It perhaps isn't the best piece of work I've ever done, but I think it is. I think that's a really valid point, and I think it is about reflecting and perhaps me engaging more with councillors in the future to gain some insight into how you believe what you've gained as individuals, and also as the wider core of the committee. And I think that's a valid challenge, and I think that's something that we should be taking on board. So thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, it can be done by questionnaire or whatever, but I think we can make it more value added. But I appreciate you have much more important things to concentrate at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Walter. That was very enlightening. Right, anybody else wants to speak?
Not to speak really, Chairman, just to say that this is a standard requirement, and I'm happy to support that we accept the document and it goes forward to council for its approval.
Right. Are we all in favour of that? Yeah. Do we need a roll call, Elaine? You muted.
Chairman, we don't require a roll call on this particular item. Thank you.
Okay. Right, fine. We're moving on then to item number 7, Internal Audit Annual Report 19-20. I believe that's Lucy Pledge that's presenting it.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
This is my first report to the committee, and hopefully it sets out really what my statutory role is. So I'm required under statute to give an independent opinion on the council's governance, risk and control environment, and also it sets out the results of the internal audit work. So the team has given regular updates to you during the year, so hopefully there isn't any surprises. But also what this does is bring it all together for you in one place at the end of the year. So if I can take you to page 32 of the pack, that sort of sets out the opinion. So as I'm stated, I'm required to look at your governance, basically how well the council runs its business, how it manages its risks, what the control, particularly how you manage your finances. One of the things, it is a backward look, but similar to accounting practice, I have to make it contemporary at the time of publishing. So as we all know, COVID has, although lockdown commenced in March, it has had a significant impact on nationally and locally. So I have caveated some of my opinion through just to take that into account. So that represents a balanced picture, and obviously taking into account that the council has adapted well to the emergency. So hopefully the rest of the pages moving forward sets out how I came to that opinion, and it sets it out clearly for the committee to understand the rationale for that. It is a summary of all the work. I try to make these reports clearer and concise and easy to read, so hopefully that came across. So the next bit I want to draw out to your attention is on page 33. So the annual governance statement, again, is a document for the committee and the council to produce for the public. Again, it's like an end of year school report to the public, and you're required as a council to draw any significant governance issues to public's attention in how well you've run the council's business and protected the public purse. So again, the only area that I'm really suggesting that the council and the committee might wish to draw to the attention of the public is around COVID-19 and the lessons learned from that. Obviously, some of those are largely unknown at the moment, but obviously we're working through moving from the crisis to recovery. So it will have impact more for next year's annual governance statement, but because the published statement is in July, you do have to make that contemporary. So again, that's the only suggestion for the annual governance statement. So moving forward, the next thing we tend to do is give you some assurance around our scope of our work. So if I take you to page 39, one of the key things there I'm pleased to report is the delivery of your plan. As you know, there was a major change, and we are very pleased that Assurance Lincolnshire, maybe I should have started with this, how pleased we are to work with you. And obviously your team moved to Assurance Lincolnshire in December, and they continued to deliver the plan. And as you can see, even with the challenges faced by COVID and the year end, we've delivered 93% of the original revised plan that you approved. So again, that's a really major achievement given what we were facing and what the council was facing. So I would really like to thank the officers for their help and support to the audit team for getting that and supporting that process. Statutorily, I'm required as an independent opinion to let the committee know that I've had no restrictions to scope or impairment to do my work. We have a very collaborative and cooperative relationship. We challenge, as you would expect, but the audit process is supported by a collaborative approach to working and looking at how we can improve together. So again, I have nothing that I wish to draw to the attention of the committee. So again, in terms of independence, if I take you to page 40, that talks about other significant work. So one of the things our standards are key is to how to protect our independence, is make sure that we don't get too involved in operational processes. So we set out what other significant work we do. It's all related to governance, risk control. I can give you that assurance, but it sets out some of the key aspects and key areas of work that we give proactive advice rather than an assurance piece which has an opinion at the end. So that's what we set out, really, to give you that assurance of other work that we do for the council. One of the key points is the subsidy work. We do that to help keep the costs of audit down and support the external audit subsidy work. So moving on to page 41, that gives you a headlines. Quality is key to any practice, and we are obliged to comply with standards of good practice, which is a public sector internal audit standards. So we undertake a self-assessment every year against these standards and guidance from SIPFA, and I've just shared some of our key headlines around our quality assurance programme and our continuing professional development programme. So we're always seeking to do things and improve from any feedback from yourselves or from our client. One of the things we are, which I've drawn to attention, is we are every 5 years obliged to have an external assessment, and the one is due for next year. And we will be seeking to engage with yourselves as the audit committee to help give some feedback on our practice. So the rest of the paper from 42 and 43 onwards is benchmarking data, setting out the outcomes of some audits, the opinions, the recommendations, how management have implemented the agreed improvements, and details on our KPIs. So I think that's really my introduction to my annual report, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Ross Jackson's got a hand up. Ross?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that report, Lucy. Obviously you've got quite a big caveat on the impact of COVID, and also with changes to working practice, a lot of people working from home. My question is, how much of this assurance is obsolete at the moment and in need of revision for next year?
The opinion is current. It's not obsolete, so it's an opinion as now. What it will impact is next year's opinion. So we'll be working with the client to look at our audit plan and look at the changes in recovery that the council made against the impact of COVID. So that will be part of our audit plan going forward. So we recognise the next paper sort of sets out the plan for next year, and I think that's the bit that needs to be revisited and reset. It is a backward look, so it is current. The opinion is current because I've taken into account that caveat. So you're performing adequately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Walter, you want to? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, we all fall into that trap, don't we? I apologise for that, Chairman. Lucy, just three little questions. Right, by the way, I like to compliment you on the report. It's very easily and understandable, and I can find my way through it quite quickly rather than wading through lots of pages. So thank you very much for that, Lucy. Interested on the first one on page 34. You mentioned the peer review, LGA review, and you identified a number of good working practices within the council, which is good. I was wondering if there was anything that you found that perhaps, if I would describe them as areas for improvement when you did the comparison, that you might take forward into future audits.
I think where we've looked at our plan, the peer review would have been included in that assessment. So I haven't looked at in detail the peer review action plan response. Stacey might be able to give you a bit more detail of that focus, but we do, and we will be taking it into account together with any recovery plan in our 2020-21 plan. And as part of my head of internal audit opinion, I'll be looking to leverage what the council has done to address those issues. So if we don't actually do a piece of audit work, I would be looking to see what actually actions have been taken. A lot of the actions obviously have been put on hold for many of councils where they've undertaken peer reviews because of the COVID. So, but we are looking to see and reset and see how that's integrated into new ways of working, because things might obviously change since the peer review was undertaken.
Okay, thank you for that. My second question, if I'm permitted, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, carry on.
On page 38, bottom of the page, you talked about the consultancy given to the, I think it's to the finance project. That's right, yes, I think during the enterprise, I think it's to the finance project. And you provide a consultancy on project governance and data migration. It's probably, if it's not appropriate here, maybe somewhere else, but I just wondered if you were going to do any work on go live testing and transition management before the new system comes into place on the new finance system, because clearly this will impact other things in the other sections of the papers in terms of, and some of the actions I believe are dependent, or mitigations are dependent on the new finance system coming in place.
Yes, I can confirm that we are looking at, so we do a number of phases on project development. Yeah. So we always start at governance and project oversight, but Stacey, and Stacey can come in after I've finished responding, because she's actually doing the work and overseeing that work.
Right.
So we look as part of a key assurance provider in terms of giving highlight reports on any of the risk, governance and control environment, and obviously how the project is implemented to help inform Adrian in his go live decisions.
Okay, thanks.
Stacey, do you want to come in?
Just to echo what you said, really, Lucy, we have got time in the plan to continue looking at the Business World Finance project. Like Lucy says, we do look at the project in stages. So as the project progresses, we will continue to work alongside the Council and PSPS to review the migration, the implementation, and as you say, the walkthrough and the go live testing as well.
Lovely. Okay, I did have a third question, but I don't think it's that important, Mr. Chairman, so I'll let you carry on.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Lucy. That was a very, very good report. So if we're all happy with that, we'll move on to item 8, which is a draft internal audit plan 20 to 21, and I think that's Stacey.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this report sets out the internal audit plan as at the 1st of April. This report would have initially come to committee in March, but as the meeting was cancelled, it's been brought forward to today. So the plan details the activities to be audited and the indicative scope for each audit that we plan to look at. The internal audit plan has been developed from the Council's assurance map. This was last updated in February 2020, and that was with input from management of the Council. Figure 1 on page 57 also shows you the key sources of information that we use to develop the audit plan for the coming year. We, of course, as Lucy's previously mentioned, recognise the fact that with the outbreak of COVID, there will be an impact on the governance, risk and control environment for the Council. Once this draft plan has been approved, we will need to look and review the plan to make sure that we are still reviewing those areas of biased risks to the authority. So that is something that we can look at after this report. Moving on to page 58. This confirms that your internal audit plan is 200 days, and we've also got your core audit team contact details at the top of that page. In the tables across page 58 and 59, you'll see information on the key audit areas and the rationale for inclusion within the audit plan. This plan was drafted prior to COVID-19. There will potentially be changes within that. Appendix A provides you with the detail of the plan. On page 62, confirms our work is carried out in conformance with the UK public sector internal audit standards. And these standards do require the scope of internal audit to cover a range of council activities. So this is to ensure that Lucy, as head of internal audit, can provide her opinion at the end of the year. And the moment, we're happy that the plan does give us a great scope for that. Details of our internal audit strategy can be found at the bottom of the page, and figure 3 on page 63 just with the overall assurance status for the prior year. Moving on to appendix C, which is on page 64. So this is in regards to our working protocols, and our performance is monitored by the Section 151 officer as well as the Audit Governance Committee. So each quarter, when we bring forward our progress report, you will have details of our performance within there. And finally, Appendix D provides you with details of our quality assurance framework. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. George?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to page 58 and 59, I couldn't see anything in relation to value for money. How do we assure ourselves and the council that the various projects you're looking at actually do give value for money in the terms of so that the council can be assured that they're getting best benefits for their books? Thank you.
Thank you. So this year we have got scheduled a programme and project management audit, and as part of that we will be reviewing all of the projects across the authority to identify those which are due to deliver the value for money to the authority. We'll be obviously selecting those of greatest sort of importance to the council in order for us to be able to provide that assurance to members.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, right. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. Thanks for this report, Stacey. Just a couple of things that I wanted to emphasise. You've got an emphasis on good governance. I think working from home is going to pose governance challenges that are not necessarily yet ironed out. I mean, some of them we've had in previous Zoom committee meetings where people have not been able to access the meetings properly. That's just one example. My major concern also is health and safety, because we have a lot of proposed cuts coming up, and I think a lot of them could possibly have health and safety implications, which I think it will be important to take account of on your audit. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Do you want to reply to that? No.
No, just thank you, Councillor Jackson, and yes, those will be taken on board and taken forward with the reviews.
Thank you. Walter, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stacey, I may have got the wrong end of stick of this, but I think I read somewhere that due to the impact of the COVID-19, obviously we've lost sort of the first quarter of this year in many ways, and so you hope to start up in the, I think I read somewhere the second to fourth quarter. Do you have the capacity to concertina the work into say a 9-month period to do that? And bearing in mind there'll be a lot of other councils I think asking for the same sort of requirement. So I'm just, it's a capacity question. Do you have the capacity to do it?
Stacey, do you want me to pick this one up?
Yes, please, Lucy. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Stacey.
I just thought I'd stay for this one. So I think we're working with all clients, and this is just not ourselves as Assurance Lincolnshire, to reset the plan. So there will have to be something of what must do, what will impact my head of internal audit opinion, and looking at how we can obviously add value. I think we will obviously look at our capacity, but there will be some things that won't be able to fit in, because it's not just about ourselves into capacity, it's also the client to actually respond to the audit process. So again, we could obviously, I have a sort of co-source model, so we have a combination of partners and relief staff that can help plug resource gaps. But again, the client wouldn't want 3 or 4 auditors at a particular time, because they won't have the capacity to do that work. So we will be working closely with Adrian to look at what we and yourselves. So we'll be coming in September with your risk profile would have changed as well, picking up the Councillor Jackson's point around home working, remote working, and the impact that has on your risks, including health and safety. So I think it does need a whole reset. So I think some of the business as usual will be changing. The council will have taken more opportunities to work differently, but also we will need to look at what you want must-dos for the head of internal audit opinion and your annual governance statement next year.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that. I'm sorry I addressed that to the wrong person. Mr. Chairman, just one more question, and it doesn't find its place here, but I'm not quite sure where else to place the question. So with your forbearance, obviously I've seen the news about the strategic alliance with Boston, and that's been described as a change project. I'm just wondering at some point whether that needs to be looked at some point. It's a great opportunity. It sounds a wonderful opportunity, but as a change project, it might have to feature, or would it feature anywhere in the audit program? And John, probably I'm looking at you more than anything else, because I'm not quite sure where to position this question.
John, what do you think?
Thank you, Walter. I think what will be happening with the change programme is it will be going through, there's a number of phases. There's the first phase, which is going through at the moment, and there's the phases 2 and 3, and part of those phases will be scrutiny and overview of what's happening there, and if there's anything as we go through that process that we think will impact and think audit and the Audit and Governance Committee need to be considering, then that's clearly something that we'll be bringing to your attention. But there will be overview and scrutiny of the process as it goes through.
Yeah, so the appropriate due diligence undertaken through solicitors and things like that.
Yeah, in terms we have legal advice on all this already in terms of where we are and where we're looking to go. But as I say, from a council's perspective and the wider councillor cohort, there will be opportunities going forward for them to oversee what's happening and give input and to scrutinise where we're going with it. Okay.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Are we all willing to note and approve this? John, do we need to go to a vote on this?
Item 8, yes, we need a proposer and a seconder and a vote, please, Chairman.
I'll propose it. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yeah.
Anybody? Can I? Seconder?
Yeah, I'm willing to second.
Councillor Jackson. So
thank you. If I do a roll call of names
for
the recorded vote, Chairman, if you would just indicate whether you were for or against or abstain. Councillor Hibbert-Graves.
For.
Councillor Grover's absent. Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Benjamin.
For.
Councillor Davey. I think he's abstained. He's left the meeting temporarily. Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Knowles. Councillor Knowles. For. You're on mute, Councillor Knowles. Councillor Knowles, could I have you, please?
I'm just.
I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted now, Councillor.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Brooks is absent. Thank you. So we have 5 for, none against, 2 abstentions, 2 absent. So that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you for that, Stacey. I think you're up again next. Item number 9, Internal Audit Progress Report, Q4, 2019-20. And I think that's you again, Stacey.
It is. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you. So this report covers the period January 2020 through to April 2020. And just a slight note for members, you'll notice that the progress report format has changed. This is the format that you'll see moving forward. But just to provide you with some reassurance, the website has changed, the content has remained the same. So you'll see the same details within the report. So just starting with the key messages. So within this quarter, we have issued 3 reports. We've issued revenues key controls, which received high assurance. Property fund investments received substantial assurance. And we've issued a consultancy report for Business World, the new finance system. So as we've previously mentioned, with the onset of COVID-19, this has had a slight impact on our ability to progress some of the audit work due to obviously staff having other operational priorities. But I am pleased to report that all audit reports are now at draft report stage or have been issued as final. On page 74, you'll find the executive summaries for the 2 assurance pieces that we've issued in the quarter. And just as an update on page 75, so accountancy services key controls has now been issued as final, and that receives substantial assurance. And the HR payroll key controls testing is now at draft report stage with an indicative opinion of substantial assurance as well. So the other significant work that we undertook during the quarter was the assurance mapping process, and this was to help the council map assurances against the critical activities and key risks, and this also helped to develop the audit plan that we've just discussed. On page 76, we'll be able to see our performance on key indicators. So as previously mentioned, we have achieved 93% of the revised audit plan and 85% of the financial systems have been completed. Other matters of interest to the committee are noted on page 77. And then moving on to Appendix 2 on page 79. So this provides you with a summary of the number of outstanding agreed actions as at the 30th of April. And on page 80, you'll find the full details of all of those actions that are currently outstanding. Although there does appear to be quite a few actions outstanding, you'll note that all of them are related to the implementation of the new finance system. And so all of the due dates have been rolled forward to October, just to align with that new implementation date. And then finally, on Appendix 3, you'll see an up-to-date position of the 2019-20 audit plan. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you for that report again and for all the work that's gone into it. Page 74, on the substantial assurance of property funds, you identify that there are areas that could where monitoring could be improved and review of the fund performance. What are these areas? Can you be a bit more specific, please?
Yes, of course. So a couple of the agreed actions in respect of that was to invite the fund managers to audit and governance. So that was obviously scheduled for March. But as you've previously mentioned, for a written statement, hopefully something like that moving forward would provide you with a bit more assurance there. And the second area was for the council to consider a benchmarking exercise. And that's something that will be raised with the portfolio holder to consider moving forward.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? George.
Thank you, Chairman. The comments about the implementation of the new finance system. Walter has alluded to the management changes which are currently going through, and there's a wish there to have more and more integrated work with the partner Boston. Will the financial systems which are being implemented be compatible with the Boston council systems to ensure we have appropriate implementation?
Could I refer that to Adrian, please?
Yeah, my understanding is that they aren't compatible. Steve might know more on this, but I couldn't tell you what IT system Boston have got at the moment. I think we do need to bear in mind that the management restructure with Boston is something completely separate to this and has come about in the last I don't know, few months, whereas the IT system has been planned over the last year or two. No doubt, once the systems are embedded in both authorities, then it's something we can look at, but it's not part of the, it's not, I don't think for a moment that the Boston finance system is the same as the one that we're implementing. In fact, Steve could confirm, but I'll be fairly certain it isn't.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Yeah, I can confirm that both systems are different, but what we're doing with respect to the new system, Unit 4 Business World, is to ensure that we have the ability, should we wish at a later date, to transfer financial information.
Whereas the IT system has been planned over the last year or so.
As and when we're required, but at the moment, obviously that's down to a future development of the partnership at some point in the future.
Thank you for that, Chairman. Could I just come back a little bit, if I may? I was going to bring it up under the risk register, and Walter alluded to it as well. It seems to me that while nothing to do with the merits or otherwise of the proposals, I do think it ought to be on the risk register in relation to this and in relation to the office moves as well, because there seems to be linkages through to all three of them.
Chair, if I may, I think that's a valid point. I'm happy to put that on the risk register.
Thank you. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, two things, just to commend you on page 75, where you talked about the other significant work, the combined assurance status review. Matthew Waller took me through the process, and I was heartened by that. It seemed very comprehensive, and I certainly commend that. I'm not sure what the outcomes are going to be, but certainly I just wanted to say I thought it was a good process, and I think it'll cover most of the activities of the council, and I take confidence from that. The second point I've got is on page 77, and it's about the target dates for inspection of accounts, both for the draft and also, I think the drafts have to be available by the 31st of August. I'm just wondering if there's any, I notice there's one or two points which are dependent on the new finance system, but I think I presume they need mitigation in some way. I'm just wondering to what extent they might affect the completion of the draft accounts ready for the target date of the 31st of August. I'm not an accountant, so I can't ask you the question. I can't sort of detail it, but my thinking is if there's some mitigation still outstanding on accounts receivable and payable, are those issues likely to affect the preparation of the accounts? And I may be asking the wrong person, I do apologise, but I'm sure someone can help me.
Yes, could Adrian or Steve respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. I can respond to that. No, obviously the audits are on the basis of the processes that we undertake and that Lucy and her team and Stacey have undertaken. That will not have an implication on the timeline for completion of the accounts. The timeline just takes into account the impact on members of the team in respect of COVID-19.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are we all happy now? Right. Is it duly noted? Are we all? So I'll take it as noted. Right. Thank you, Stacey. That was a very good report again.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just, if it's okay if I leave the meeting. I think Stacey may stay for the rest of the meeting, but if it's okay,
yeah,
I'll leave.
That's fine. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for your input.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right. Moving on to item number 10, Audit Strategy Memorandum 2019-2020. I think we've got John Mahai. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all right. It's Mackie.
Mackie,
yes,
sorry, I do apologise.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the report's pretty self-explanatory, so I'll take it as mostly read by the committee and its members. But what I'll do is just point out a few key areas in there. I think page 92 of the pack talks about a new group audit, a new group structure. obviously the council has set up a new company, Invest East Lindsey Limited. And obviously at the time we wrote this report, we were unsure whether the council were going to be producing group accounts in relation to that subsidiary company. It's probably a question that Adrian can answer, or Steve, but that might mean some additional work for us around a new group company into the council's accounts. I think pages 93 to 97 cover the identified risks that we've brought to your attention. These are pretty standard across the sector. I don't think there's anything in the plan this year that's specific to the council. So we have the usual management override of controls, which is a default risk by the accounting standards. We also have the valuation of PPE and the valuation of the pensions liability. The big two meaty chunky figures in the accounts that are all based on other people coming up with some judgmental estimated figures for us to look at. It poses some real problems for us. Page 99 just covers the audit fee, and at this stage I think we're raising the prospect with you that there will be the potential for additional fees around those areas of PPE and pensions this year. The amount of work we're having to do in relation to those areas is increasing exponentially as a result of external reviews of the work that we're doing and the expectations placed upon us. And also there might be an additional fee if group accounts are produced as well. Pages 101 to 102 just cover the materiality, and I think the benchmark is pretty in last year's audited accounts. At this stage, we've set a figure of 1.9 million for that materiality figure. Obviously, we will update that for when we receive the draft accounts for this year and take that forward. We do set lower levels for looking at those areas that are most likely to be public scrutiny, members' allowances, audit fee, officers' remuneration. These are always the areas that the public actually care about, not the other 27 million pounds that the council spends, but we do set a level of materiality for those areas accordingly. That's probably all I want to draw your attention to, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, anybody? Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jackson.
Sorry, didn't realise I was muted. Page 94, you talk about the changes in the valuation of property, and I just want to emphasise with COVID's new normal, the impact on not just our property funds, but the council properties and the valuation of those. The valuation of office space at the moment, particularly office space that we may need to sell, that's definitely a moving space, and I want you to really kind of emphasise that when you take a look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, just to respond to that. Yeah, obviously the value of PPE at the 31st of March is a key issue across all sectors at the minute. We're currently doing NHS audits, and it's a real issue for them as well. The latest valuation guidance has the expectation of your valuer placing a material uncertainty in their valuation report at the 31st of March, which poses some extra problems for us. If he's placing an uncertainty on the values is giving us, we have to do extra work around those values and get ourselves enough assurance to be comfortable with what he's saying. It's very much an evolving piece of work at the minute. I know discussions are being held by the NAO and all the audit suppliers around a potential way forward to move this on, but it does have the prospect of creating perhaps an additional disclosure in the audit opinion for this year around an emphasis of matter around the value as material uncertainty. But as I say, it's constantly evolving. Every week something has moved on, and it's really waiting on the NAO and SITFA to come up with some definitive proposals that everyone is happy with, really. But yeah, it will be one of those key areas we do place additional attention on this year.
Thank you. Are we all happy with that? It was a very good report. So we'll move on to item number 11, which is the audit progress report, May 2020. And I think that's you again, John.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just setting out that to date, all we've done is the interim visit where we look at your controls and systems to make sure that we're happy with it and there's no additional risk being identified for the opinion. And we can report that there were no issues that we noted from that work. I think the report also talks about Mazar's response to COVID-19 and what's happening with us. Much like everyone else, we're confined to home working. There's no indication as to when that will be lifted for us. So we are facing the prospect of doing the audit from home, which does pose some challenges, some issues, especially around asking the right questions to the right people and getting responses in a timely fashion. But it's working well at other authorities to date, so we don't see any problems with that going forward. As and when restrictions are lifted for us to get out and about, we obviously will start engaging more with officers face to face. So apart from that, I don't think there's anything I need to draw your attention to. So again, happy to take questions.
Any questions? No, we're all happy with the report. Good. Well, thank you ever so much, John. That's been a very full and comprehensive report again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we'll move on to item. Are we all comfortable at the moment, or does anybody want a comfort break or anything, or anybody want to put the hand up? No, we're all happy. Are we? Okie dokie. Right, moving on, item number 12, financial statements, 2019 to 2020 accounting policies, and that will be Adrian, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. This is a fairly straightforward report. It's a standard report that we bring to you each year. And the reason why we bring it is it's good practice to bring it. So it's and what happens is these accounting policies are then used formally to underpin the statement of accounts, which we'll come back to in another couple of months, as I think John said earlier. The reason for having accounting policies is so that they allow consistency from one year to the next, and also so they allow consistency between authorities as well. So the sort of things we're talking about is how we account for depreciation, how we account for accruals, that type of thing. I'm happy to report that there's no significant changes from last year, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Have you got any questions? No. Right. Does this need a vote on it, John?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I did put my hand up, but could just a point of clarification, please, Mr. Chairman, for Adrian. Adrian, I'm not a sad person, but I did actually read some sections of it. And if I could just take it to section 23 on page 133, and it talks about reserves. And what triggered my thinking was that I'm pretty sure that I've read somewhere that the council is going to have to dip into its reserves for this year. And but in the second paragraph of the reserves, it talks about certain reserves which are kept to manage account processing and so on, working, whatever. Does that need to be looked at again in light of what's happening currently? Is there a cap on those reserves which have to be reserved for those accounting processes? Is there a certain number we can't go below? Does that have to be specified anywhere? Sorry, I'm speaking from ignorance because I'm not an accountant, Adrian.
No, not the specific reserves that you refer to. There's no set minimum or maximum. What we do is take a risk-based approach and look at it and look at the values of what we're looking at and the potential for a risk to materialise. And that's how we ascertain that reserve. Some of the reserves have just come about by chance because, for instance, business rates, we've got a surplus in 1 year, we've put that in another reserve to future years. So it's not been calculated scientifically, it's just been taken because that reserve comes along. The only reserve that we do have, which you do have to have a minimum for statutorily, is a general fund minimum balance. I can't remember what that is, but I think it's around about the 2 million mark off the top of my head, but I might be wrong. But generally speaking, you are correct that we will be dipping into reserves this year because of the COVID. But we have got some in the region of 20 million pounds plus worth of reserves. So we are quite fortunate that we do have a substantial level of reserves, but obviously they are earmarked for future projects as well. So we need to be careful and manage that accordingly going forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will have a question towards the end on that, but I'm happy to go through the agenda to continue through the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have to vote on that, do we not, Elaine?
Yes, we do, Chairman. I'll again, this is for
do we need a
read members' names out? For, against, abstain if you can indicate. Councillor Greaves.
Can we have a proposal and a seconder first, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'll propose it.
I'll second.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Hibbert Greaves.
For.
Councillor Grover is absent. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Councillor Benjamin.
For.
Councillor Davey is an abstention because he's temporarily left the meeting. Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Knowles. Councillor Knowles, you're on mute.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Brooks is absent. So we have 5 for, none against, 1 abstention, 2 absent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. We'll move on to item 13, mandatory inquiries for those charged with governance. And that's Adrian yet again.
I think it's Pete, Chair.
Is it?
Yeah.
I was accounting policies, Adrian, but you beat me to it.
Sorry about that. I've just got it down wrong. Yep. Carry on, please.
Sorry, yes. Adrian, you taking this one?
Who's taking it?
I thought it was you taking it, Pete, but I will do if you want me to.
Yeah. Sorry, I was down for accounting policies.
I beg your pardon, we've done it the wrong way around, haven't we?
Yeah, indeed.
Well, again, it's just a standard report that comes to you each year, and it's something that we do on behalf of external audit. So I don't know if John wants to come in and comment on it, but it's for you to then is provide you with answers. The questions have been posed by external audit, and it's just to make sure that you are happy with those answers that we are providing and that you can stand by them.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that, Adrian, as well. These are just questions that the auditing standards require us to make of those charged with governance, just covering particular aspects of fraud, which require a formal response from yourselves, so we can consider those responses as necessary. So as Adrian pointed out, these are similar every year. I don't think they've changed for a number of years, so we just need a minuted response to those.
Okay, I think we've got a question from Walter.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick question about continuity. On page 39 and 40, sorry, page 139 and 140, it talks about the risk register was updated and presented to the Audit and Governance Committee along with the annual fraud reports, which is fine. When I flip back to the conversation I had with John, to the annual report, the internal audit annual report, there was a list of documents there. I didn't actually see those documents there. It may just be a matter of timing that they haven't been submitted yet and we're playing catch up. But I just noted that the documents you say in Appendix A here, the audit regs, the fraud risk register and the annual fraud report, I don't see that in the list of documents in the annual report. And it just needs some sort of a little look at to see if we've got continuity there.
Is that a question for Stacey? Do you mean, was that covered as part of the annual audit?
Well, it's not listed. I mean, in this document we're looking at now, it's talking about the fraud reports and the risk register being presented to the audit committee as a response, but I didn't see it in the annual report. So I don't mind how it's addressed. It was just that I couldn't quite map them across. That was all. It may just be something to note.
Okay. Can I look into it and come back to you if that's all right?
Yeah, by all means, yes, yeah, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I think that also needs to go to a vote, does it not? I'll
Yes.
propose it. Yes, I'll propose it. Can we have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Right, thank you. I shall read the names out. Councillor Hibbert-Greaves.
Yes, 4.
Councillor Grover is absent. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Benjamin.
4.
Councillor Davey. Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Knowles.
4.
And Councillor Brooks is absent. So we have 5 for, 1 abstention, 2 absent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, moving on. Item number 14 is my favourite part. This annual Treasury Management Review, 2019-20, and I think it's Sean Howson.
Thank you very much,
Good
Chair.
morning. Good morning.
Morning to you all. May I just add before the start of this report, the information has been compiled based on best information at the moment. We are in the process of producing the final accounts, and some of the figures may be subject to slight change and subject to change by audit, but this is the best available information that we have at this stage. It's just unfortunate that the audit of the accounts and the timescale for producing those accounts have been put back a little bit. So I just thought I would cover that before I started my report. You have an overarching report on pages 141 to 144, and then we go to the actual annual review report for 2019-20 on page 145. The council is required to produce an annual report after the end of each financial year as part of the CIPFA Code of Practice. And it's also required to produce an annual treasury strategy in advance of the year, a mid-year review report, which has been produced, and as I stated, the annual review report, which is this report you have today. In addition to that, the Audit and Governance Committee also receive quarterly treasury management review reports to ensure that the Audit and Governance Committee is well informed and doesn't receive any surprises later on in the financial year. And the regulatory environment places responsibility on members for the review and scrutiny of treasury management policies and activities, and that review is done by Audit and Governance. Part 2 of the report refers to the Council's capital expenditure and financing for 2019-20, and the table on top of page 147 shows that you had an estimate of £18,188,000 fully financed in the year, and the actual outturn was £8,262,000. And for full details of that capital expenditure can be seen at Appendix A1 on page 163. Paragraph 3, the council's overall borrowing need. Underlying need to borrow for capital expenditure is termed the capital financing requirement. This is a gauge of the council's indebtedness. It represents the 2019 unfinanced capital expenditure and prior year's net or unfinanced capital expenditure, which hasn't previously been met by revenue or other resources. And the council's MRP policy also has to be approved. This is how we actually pay for unfinanced capital expenditure, and that was approved as part of the Treasury strategy itself on the 6th of March 2019. The table at the top of page 148 shows the position in relation to the council's capital financing requirement, and you'll see the estimate was that the overall CFR capital financing requirement was just a fraction under 24 million, and the actual outturn was 22,570,000 as a result of some voluntary revenue provision, which I'll come to later on in the report. And the gross borrowing position, the council currently has external borrowing of £24 million, because it had some temporary borrowing for cash flow purposes at the end of the financial year. And the capital financing requirement, as previously reported, of 22,570. Actual financing costs as a proportion of the net revenue stream at the top of page 149. You'll see that the council's got an authorised limit of £44 million for external borrowing. The maximum gross borrowing position during the year was £24 million, It has an operational boundary of £38 million, so it is well within its operational boundary. And the average borrowing position for the financial year was 20.2 million. And the financing costs as a proportion of the council's net revenue stream, effectively that's the cost of your borrowing, the interest paid on your borrowing and the interest received on your investments. You'll see that's minus 5.12 because the council receives more interest for from revenue purposes than it does pays out on its external borrowing. The treasury position as at the 31st of March 2020, shown in the table on page 4, you will see principal and accrued interest. We have a total of £63.187 million worth of investments and some temporary borrowing in there, which knocks that down to 58.128 net investments. And the tables on page 150 provide more information on those investments, which I don't propose to go into. It just gives it a bit of a breakdown as to the types of investments you have: banks, local authorities, money market funds, and how that's split between treasury investments and non-treasury investments. The strategy for 2019-20 on paragraph 5. You'll see the chart there that shows the bank rate versus the LIBOR rate. The LIBOR rate is the borrowing rates and lending rates in the market. And you'll see there towards the end of the financial year that they fell. Investment returns remained low during 2019-20. The expectation was in our strategy that interest rates would stay around 0.75% during 2019-20 and probably rise to 1% during 2020. But unfortunately, that increase in rates didn't materialise, and in fact, they actually did reduce. Investment balances have been kept to a minimum through the agreed strategy of using reserves and balances to support internal borrowing rather than borrowing externally from the financial markets, with the exception of the property fund investments. If we look at paragraph 5.2, the borrowing strategy and control of interest rate risk, we maintained an underborrowed position. This meant capital borrowing need was not fully funded with loan debt. Effectively, that reduces your exposure to financial investments in the market, and also it reduces your cost of carry on borrowing. There's not a lot of incentive to borrow at an external higher rate than it would be. Then you could invest those funds, which aren't required at the moment, at considerably low rates. So it reduces the cost of carry effectively. On page 153, you'll see Link Asset Services expectation for interest rates in August 2019, and you can see from that going forward there was no expectation of an interest rate cut, but as we all know, due to COVID-19, it's had a major effect on markets and also interest rates dropping virtually down to zero, with possibly the prospect of negative interest being talked about in the market at the moment. You'll see from the PWLB rates graph on page 153, there was a sharp increase in the rates that local authorities were charged for borrowing. This was due to a change of strategy by the HM Treasury. They wanted to limit the amount of councils were borrowing for commercial purposes. So effectively they, without notice in October, on the 9th of October, they increased the margin of borrowing for 1% over gilts, hence a 1% increase in all borrowing costs to the council. Paragraph 6, Treasury borrowing. As at the end of the financial year, the council had £4 million outstanding of temporary borrowing, which was for cash flow purposes. And I can confirm that that temporary borrowing has now been repaid in April, and that temporary borrowing incurred a charge of £1,570. And the non-treasury borrowing, which was the borrowing incurred for property fund, was £20 million and remains at £20 million. Paragraph 7, the investment outturn for 2019-20, approved by council on 6th of March 2019. That strategy sets out effectively your policy for making investments, counterparty limits, which financial institutions you are prepared to invest in, for example, and the types of investment instruments that you are comfortable in investing in. I can confirm that investment activity during the year conformed to that strategy. and the council had no liquidity issues on an ongoing basis. And the table on the bottom of page 155 refers to balance sheet resources, and you'll see at the end of the last financial year, the balance was 32,637,000, and it is roughly estimated at this stage that that is likely to be in the region of 27,870,000. The council held average investment balances of 34.1 million throughout the year, and the internal funds achieved a rate of 0.946 against the benchmark 3-month LIBOR rate of 0.634%. And the council also held average non-treasury investments of £28 million, which was externally managed in property funds, which received a net average return of 3.83%. The combined rate of return on all investments therefore comes out at 2.239%. The original budget for investment income was 1.34 million, and at the end of the financial year, net investment interest earned was 1.4 million, which was roughly 60,000 above the original estimate. Treasury investments earned 324,000, and non-treasury investments earned 1,075,000. Full details of the property funds held by the council will be discussed in section 9 shortly. Section 8 provides a lot of information in relation to the economy and interest rates. I don't propose to go through that. There's a lot of information there, and if anybody does have any questions on that, I'm happy to try and answer those. And finally, paragraph 9, other issues. IFRS financial instruments require the council to value its financial instruments at fair value. The council has historically valued these investments at net asset value. The table on page 160 shows a breakdown of the council's property funds in relation to the purchase cost. And you'll see from that table that the cost was 27.3 million. The purchasing costs themselves was 694,000, making a total cost of just a fraction under 28 million pounds. That's where we refer to the 28 million. The table on page 161 gives you a breakdown now in relation to those property funds, with the first column starting with your purchase cost of just under 28 million. The next column provides you with details of your revenue received in the financial year, just over £1 million. And you'll see from each breakdown of each fund there that the returns were in the region of anywhere from 3.2 to 4.73%. The next column provides you details of the net asset values at the 31st of March, which comes to 26.775 million, giving a total gain since purchase, total loss. In some cases there is a gain, in some cases there is a loss, but an overall loss from purchase cost of £1,223,685. And the next column is your gain, your in-year gain or loss. So within year, and a lot of this has come about as a result of the last three to 4 months, the COVID effect, which has resulted in property funds going down in value by 1.25 million. The annualized capital fund gain or loss, that shows you how much the actual asset value of the fund has gone up or down, and you'll see that ranges from a reduction of 1.4% through to a reduction of 7.92%. And the final column gives you your estimated combined return, in other words, your overall return, which is your revenue return and your capital return added together. So that ranges from a positive return of 1.79 through to a loss of 4.33%. And page 162, as we've discussed in this meeting already, current climate, valuers are finding it difficult to place a value on commercial property funds, and these valuations are coming through with material uncertainty clauses. The reason for this is because there are very few commercial transactions taking place, and also lease negotiations taking place, which gives them very little information to provide those valuations on. So they have to make their best estimate based on the information that they have. So they provide these material uncertainty clauses to say that they may not be accurate. They may be high, they may be low, only time will tell. Unrealised losses on Hermes property fund, that is a revenue fund, so that actually gets transferred to the pooled investments fund adjustment account. And the remaining funds are capital funds, and because they have gone down by just over 1.4 million pounds, the council is proposing to make a voluntary revenue provision for the 2019-20 accounts as part of its MRP policy. Quite a lot of the property funds in the markets are currently suspended at the moment to protect shareholder value, to ensure that they don't have to sell considerable assets at really low prices at the expense of the remaining shareholders. And the final table at the bottom of page 162 provides you details of previous year's distributions, current year's distributions, combined distributions since purchase, the final column. And then, so you'll see a total revenue, the total distribution that we received since we purchased them of 2.1 million. And then against that, we show the borrowing costs of 642,312,000, giving a net revenue position since purchase over and above borrowing costs of 1.465 million. And finally, that's the table A1 on page 163 is your capital expenditure, given a breakdown for each individual scheme, as previously discussed. We mentioned M&G Property Funds, part of the governance. They were meant to be presenting their fund at the March meeting, and then we suggested the May meeting, but when it was decided it was going to be video conferencing, we put that on hold. But they are happy to present to the next audit and governance meeting if you wish, and even so, if that is via video conferencing. So that is a decision possibly that you would like to discuss. If you want that to happen, we can arrange that to happen. That's the end of my report. There is a recommendation to produce. It recommended that as part of its role, the committee considers and approves its annual Treasury Management Review Report for 2019-20. I'm happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? George, are you ready?
No, yeah, thank you, Chair. And actually, some of these should be addressed under risk, under the risk strategy and the risk register, or under this. So apologies if I get the various things confused or mixed up in terms of that. And I also recognise that this is a very fluid situation in relation to the property management issues. But have we any indication yet on what the effect will be on our revenue position? We received quite a considerable amount of revenue. I think it's page 156 was saying there. Have we any indication how that's going to be affected by the COVID crisis in the future? Because obviously that could make quite a material difference to how the council's cash situation is in relation to it. And you also mentioned in your report, thank you for that, very comprehensive, that the many property investments are suspended. Are any of ours suspended? So we know whether or not what the situation is in relation to that. And have we got, and you may not have it, and it may be useful for the next time, if we could have a breakdown of what types of property the various companies are investing in, because retail looks dodgy, offices perhaps equally. So it'd be an indication yet for the future. And I realise a lot of this is surmising for the future, but I think it'd be helpful to the committee if we could have an overall view of what that situation is. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, in relation to the returns going forward, it is anticipated that the returns going forward will reduce. We have had some of the funds they pay their returns on a monthly basis, 2 of them, and the remaining ones declare their results, declare their dividends on a quarterly basis. So it will be quite a while before those come through. We have had 2 of them come through for April, and the returns have come down by about 0.25%. So still above 3% return, which is good, but I do anticipate that will come down going forward in the short term before it then recovers again in the medium to long term. In relation to the suspended property funds, yes, at least 4 of the funds are currently suspended, which in my opinion is a good thing, because it effectively protects East Lindsey District Council's value in that fund. It forces the people who are trying to get out of those funds to wait for their money to ascertain when we can actually get a fair value for those a fair sale for those properties, rather than have to sell them under distress and at the expense of the remaining shareholders. So yes, 4 of the funds are currently suspended. And in relation to the final point, I think it was the final point you raised about provide some information for the types of investment each fund hold. That could be done. I think that would be a little bit difficult to probably get that information in time for each of the reports. I know the fund manager presentations, when they do them, they do go comprehensively into that. But yes, I understand your point. It's a pertinent point. The valuation of those funds can be very dependent on the types of the property that they're invested in, and also in the regions that they are invested in. And it is very difficult to condense all the information that you may want into a very short report as such. But I will see, I'll take that away and see what sort of information I can obtain from the fund managers at the next quarterly report that you receive, which will be in July audit and governance meeting, I think.
Thank you for that. I'm a simple ex-lawyer, so keep it nice and simple for me, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you for that report, Sean. On page 150, you talk about the various investments in banks and local authorities. Obviously, all of the local authorities have suffered losses. Some of them will be, quite significant, similar to ours. But at the same time, we've got banks that are facing recessions in their various countries. So I have a question about the balance of risk in terms of, obviously, you were quite confident last time we spoke about this, about the balance of risk for local authority investments. But at the same time, you have this system of rating the banks, but how is that going to change? And is our investment strategy going to change to reflect that change in the balance of risks? My other question is page 163, the capital programme, refuse vehicles, and I'm not sure whether you're the right person to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The cost for refuse vehicles was £1.5 million more than we budgeted for. What's going on there? Thank you.
Okay, certainly I can answer the question in relation to the breakdown of the investments and financial institutions. What we use for investing with financial institutions as part of our treasury strategy that is approved each year, we use the services of Link Asset Services for producing a counterparty matrix. And what that matrix does, it takes into account the sovereign rating of the country where it's from, also the strength and balance sheets of the financial institutions, but also the cost of insuring against those in the market of those financial institutions not paying their debts, because you can actually insure against that. And what happens is, if a bank's cost for insuring its debt goes up in the market, that is an early warning system to the rating agencies, etc., that there may be problems. And what Link Asset Services do is they look at those certificate of deposit, I've forgotten the terminology again, and the cost of default against the debt. They look at those prices, and what they will do is they will reassess the weighting that should have on the maximum duration for investments. And what they may do is they may reduce the maximum duration that they recommend, or they may suggest that you stop making any further investments with them until such time as the cost of insuring against them defaulting is going down in the market and the risk appears to be going away. So we are quite active in how we invest with with financial institutions, and we do keep an eye on that on a daily basis. We get alerts from the external treasury advisors of this sort of information so that we are on top of it. In relation to the position of local authorities, as you will know, each local authority has to set an approved borrowing limit, which it is not allowed to exceed. So every time it borrows money from another local authority, that will be in accordance with within its approved borrowing limit. And then when that loan is due to mature, they will always have sufficient headroom to repay because they can't borrow outside of that. So if they're going to, let's say, for example, Lancashire County Council, who we have 5 million invested at the end of the financial year, when that is due to mature, what will happen is they will have to repay that borrowing to us, but that will free up £5 million worth of borrowing capacity from somewhere else because the physical act of repaying 5 million to us will effectively increase the option to borrow £5 million elsewhere. If the financial markets consider them a risk and they can't borrow it from the financial markets or other local authorities, they can always go to the Public Works Loan Board as a last resort to borrow, as they are the lenders of last resort. Also, as an added security, a local authority isn't permitted to go bankrupt. There's nothing in the legal system that allows a local authority to be made bankrupt or go into administration, etc. So what is likely to happen if anything did get seriously wrong, as we saw in the Northamptonshire County Council situation, what they are likely to do if they get into problems, they have the option, the government has an option of providing issuing a capitalisation directive, which allows them to capitalise revenue expenditure to help them out of a difficult budget situation. So my favoured option would always be to lend to a local authority than it would be to lend to a financial institution, because ultimately there is a security of the UK government there. In relation to your second point, the capital programme, that might be something that Adrian or Peter may be able to answer better than I can.
I'm looking at Pete.
Any takers? No? I think we might have to get...
Chairman.
Yes.
Chairman, sorry. I might be able to, I don't know whether I can contribute, but obviously I attend the finance portfolio meetings and the capital programme is always tabled. And the copy that I have of it, the written printed copy from the last meeting that we had, shows a budget of 1.83 million and an expenditure of 1.83 million. So at the moment, what I'm seeing is just a balance.
We'll come back to you on that if that's okay.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Jackson?
On our paper, Health Council, it says quite clearly 3.352 as actual.
Yeah, if it's okay, Councillor, I'll come back to you after the meeting and email you.
Yeah, it could be an error.
Are we happy? No? Yes. Right. Well, we'll get back to Councillor Jackson. Moving on, just before we go to Walter, Councillor David, did you want to say something?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, just a couple of thoughts from me and then a question for Sean, recognising Sean's long experience with the authority and working with investments and everything. I think the question George posed about commercial property and retail, I think, is the most important one regarding property funds at the moment. Obviously, the position that we've got in front of us is not challengeable. That's what it is. But obviously, the figures have a lag. Some of them do because of the way property funds collect and pay out. So my question to Sean really is, you know, we're not going to go back to normal, whatever normal was before all of this started. We certainly won't be going back to the way things were. It's quite clear that major companies around the UK are going to rationalise their property. They're not going to have all their staff returning to work, and they won't be able to because of the social distancing stuff. So rather than, they won't be hiring more office space, they'll be reducing office space. So there will obviously be an impact on commercial property. And also retail quite clearly is in substantial trouble. And with companies going bust on a daily basis. And being honest, the furlough scheme has really given us a false sense of where we're at, because when that scheme ends, it's quite clear that other companies are going to speed up their processes. So my question to Sean is, there is a risk from COVID-19 to the council, quite clearly, and to its funds. There is a risk on return. How great do you think that risk is? Because I noticed you said we'll return to a normal rate of return shortly, or in a medium term. I don't think that's going to happen. So how great is the risk to the council in the medium to long term from COVID-19? And what can we do other than invite M&G and other of our property fund managers to our next meeting? What can we do as an authority to reduce as much of that risk as possible? Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Sean.
Yes, I think I said in the report, the returns going back to normal, medium to long term, what that normal, whether that normal will be the norm as it stands at the moment or not, is time will tell. But in relation to the funds themselves, what will happen is they will reposition their funds over time. And in some cases, if properties become empty, they will probably find alternative uses or dispose of assets at probably lower prices, or in some cases, possibly higher prices, depending on if there's an alternative use for those sites or properties. And if there's a reduction in demand for various types of asset class, they will probably come out of those types of asset class, reduce the amount of, for example, office space. You might find the amount of office space that's available in areas will reduce, and the amount of development of new office space, for example, or retail will reduce going forward. But it is a very difficult one, because it also depends on each fund manager's strategy itself, which when we actually had the presentations by the fund managers, they actually explained what those strategies were and how they actually positioned their funds to try and achieve either large revenue returns at the expense of low capital returns, and in some cases high capital returns at the expense of lower revenue returns. So it's very difficult to put a blanket answer across each individual fund. It's probably something that the fund managers themselves we ought to invite to see if they are planning on repositioning their funds in the long term, or if they have a view as to how they plan to reduce their risk. I don't know whether Adrian has got anything else to add.
If I may, Chair, I was going to come in and say something. I think it's important that members remember that this was a long-term asset. It's a 25 to 30-year asset and investment that we're looking at here. So we know that during the course of time, there will be recessions and there'll be booms. And I accept, and I think we're all aware that we're heading for a recession and prices will dip. But I still expect that the fund will recover. And it's worth pointing out that last year, we did bring in net income of over nearly £600,000 to the council. That's £600,000 worth of savings that it had to have made elsewhere if that money didn't come in. Whilst there'll be a dip in this year, I know the question was how much, and it's almost impossible to quantify at this stage, but the current estimates are, and this is a global picture of what we're losing as an authority, we're losing somewhere between £1 and £2 million a year at the moment in lost income, of which this is a part of it. Now, there's a report that went to Exec Board last week to explain that and how we're mitigating against that. and that report is also going to full council. Obviously, it's a fluid picture of which this is just a proportion of it. So, yes, we are experiencing problems at the moment, as is the council generally. I would add that we've got mitigating plans in place for that, which is in the report, but also to bear in mind this is a long-term game, not a short-term one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just respond?
Yes, please.
I think that's all fair. But my question really about risk is that, the idea that, if we don't go back to buildings, if we don't go back to retail in the way that we were, I would be interested in how property funds are thinking they're going to readjust their portfolios. So I think that would be a useful exercise for the committee to hear from some of those people, whether by written report or by joining a meeting. I talk to people in the commercial property world who tell me that they've got more buildings listed now for sale. People are bailing all over the place from those properties because they regard them as too high a risk for them. So I think that the point Adrian made about it's a long-term strategy. Of course, it's a long-term strategy, and I supported that strategy at the time we brought it to council. I just think that this shock to the system, the recession that's going to come, is going to be so impactful on all councils, not just East Lindsey, that we need to consider very carefully how we work with our fund managers to make sure we get the maximum return on those investments. And it's quite clear to me that certain properties, warehousing, distribution, logistics, those kind of things, if property funds are investing in those, they're going to get big returns on them, quite clearly. So it's just about how balanced the portfolios are that we've invested in, and how quickly those fund managers are going to change tack to try and mitigate losses and increase profits medium to long term.
Thank you. Anybody, do you want to respond? No?
Yeah, judging by, I mean, I know this is a hot topic, and members of Audit Committee have often asked many questions in properties, investment properties. I think it's almost inevitable that these conversations will continue way into the next 6 to 9 months or so. So what I would propose is that at the earliest opportunity is that we bring those fund managers in and we can have the conversation with them in a committee format. I'm quite happy to speak to Sean about arranging those going forward, because I think members would benefit from those conversations directly with the fund managers themselves.
Good.
That sounds a very good idea. Are you happy with that, Sean? Yeah, you'll manage that, Sean, can you?
Yeah, I was heading from a mute button, but my mouse wasn't responding. Yes, I'll speak to the fund managers and see if we can get them to attend. I'm sure they'll be able to attend by VC, because then they'll not have to travel all the way from London. So it'll probably be quicker for them to do it that way. But yes, I'll contact all the fund managers to see if they can do a brief presentation to the Audit and Governance Committee. Do you have a proposal as to how long you would want them to do their presentation? How much time to allow for their presentations? I'm mindful as to how much time you have available for your meetings.
Well, we'll have to discuss that with Democratic Services. Right.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. We'll go to Walter and then to Peter Davey. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I'm building on what George had mentioned, and also Councillor Davey. I'm just wondering, yes, we all have concerns about investments. Adrian mentioned these investments are long-term, like pensions, quite right. And I think Sean mentioned on cash flow, we're okay for the moment. I'm just wondering, maybe, is there any way we can undertake some modelling or stress testing? Adrian said we've got £20 million in reserves. How long will that £20 million last us? If we take the situation last us, say, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, I'm just wondering, in terms of liquidity, cash flow, and impact on income, that's all income, is the council considering maybe looking at some scenario planning or stress testing to see what we should be doing, taking into account all these factors, I know a lot of it's got guesswork, but surely it'll help with some decision making quite early on. And of course, it can be updated as events roll out. I don't think it's entirely a waste of time. I know other organisations are doing this proactively and updating the model as they go forward. I put this to the committee as an idea and for the management team to think about.
Thank you.
May I come in there? I did say a few minutes ago, we are aware of what the losses that we're expecting each month as this continues. So we have done some testing on what incomes we've got, what income levels. We've got some idea moving forward what level of income we're expecting to lose. We also know what costs we're likely to incur for COVID. So we have done some testing, and it's being monitored, and Richard will testify, sorry, Councillor Fry will testify that on a monthly basis we're analysing this.
Right, okay.
It went to the exec board last week with mitigating things that we're taking in place. It's also going to full council, I think it's next week, it might be the week after. So all members can have this discussion, but also one of the actions is that we'll be bringing it back and reviewing it formally through full council on a quarterly basis as well. And if we have to take further remedial action, we will do so. It's something we are constantly monitoring, but more the bigger picture rather than just specifically at investment properties.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that explanation, Adrian. Obviously, did pick up on that, and you've obviously got that in hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Peter, thank you very much. Peter Davey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to come back on the query earlier about the refuse vehicles, now found the actual page you were referring to. So the budget for the scheme is actually 3,330,500, and that was phased over 2 years, the 2019-20 year and 2021 year. However, the vehicles were all delivered in or near the end of March. Therefore, that's why on that table you were looking at, it only shows part of the budget. So the actual is for the full fleet, the 3352, but that estimate is only part of the scheme. So what we will do, we will, so we've got the budget in the following year. Now it is funded from a repairs and replacement reserve, which we contribute to annually so that we can replace these things every so many years. So overall, the overspend on the vehicles is 21,740. But as I say, because this table only refers to 1 year, that's why I think it's, as you were pointing earlier, the numbers do look a bit strange there.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Jackson?
Yes, I am. I'm quite relieved.
Good. Thank you. Right. It's going to be an approval vote. So, Elaine, do you want to do your stuff?
Thank you. I'll roll call the names if you can answer, please. Councillor Hibbert-Graves.
Oh, sorry, hang on. We need to propose for a second, don't we?
Oh yeah, propose and seconder. Sorry.
I'll propose it again.
I'll second.
Right, thank you. We'll go to the vote. Councillor Hibbert-Graves.
For.
Councillor Grover is absent. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Councillor Benjamin.
For.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Knowles.
For.
And Councillor Brooks is absent. So we've got 6 for and 2 absent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right. Can I just propose we have a 5-minute break, comfort break, just before we move on to the last few items? Are we all happy with that?
Chairman?
Yes.
Can I just say that I need to leave the meeting? I've got a delivery coming in 10 minutes' time.
Okay, that's noted.
Okay, thank you.
So
I'll leave it live in case I get back.
okie dokie, thank you. So are we all right for 5 minutes, Elaine? I can't hear you.
Sorry, yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, just 5 minutes then. When we adjourn. Oh.
Thank you.
Are we all more or less ready?
Yep.
Hello, Alison.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Is everybody back, Elaine, or?
No, I think we're waiting for Councillor Davey, and Councillor Andrew said that he might.
I'm here, Elaine.
Oh yes, yeah, we're okay to proceed. Thank you, Chairman.
Right.
I'm still here at the moment, but I'm going to get a telephone call, and that's when I have to disappear.
You'll hang in for as long as you can.
I will. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right. We'll move on now to, if we're all ready, item 16, the monitoring officer's update. Oh no, sorry. 15, risk management position statement. I think that's Alison, is it?
Yeah.
It is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, so hopefully you will all have had time to read the update that is with the papers. As you can imagine, there's probably one significant addition to the strategy document at the moment, and that's our response to COVID-19. So I guess there are kind of four areas, just that I will mention briefly. I won't go into them in detail. So first area is obviously funding, and we've received some responses to the council's response to the lack of funding and loss of income and so on already from Adrian. The other is business continuity. which has been a significant test for us. The third is health and safety, in particular of staff. And the fourth one is an additional risk around the office relocation. So just really briefly, in terms of the risk to funding, there's a general statement in there about the position that the council is potentially in terms of its financial position. A lot of this will depend on how the government chooses to support local government going forward. There has been, really early on, there was an awful lot of discussion. The government were quite keen to tell local government to spend without worrying about it too much, and that we would receive recompense for that. That message got slightly watered down as we went along. So I guess less assurance now that we will have full recovery of expenditure in response to COVID-19, which I guess is to a certain extent is understandable. So that this may well depend on whether local government are prepared to recompense local government in terms of their loss of income, or purely in terms of their expenditure on the response, which the two are quite a long way apart. So some of this will depend on government's response. We've already had some relatively small amounts of money from government to contribute to our budgets. The first payment being around about 160,000. What's tending to happen is on particular issues, the government will identify a budget, and then East Lindsey or Lincolnshire will get its share of that. So by the time it gets down to district levels, that's relatively small amounts of money. So the two areas identified on there, as I say, a loss of income. I think the other area, which is a little bit more difficult for us to plan for, is around the effect on the economy. Now, clearly our strategic risk register is about the risk to us as an organisation. So it's what we always look at is whether there's a risk there which would impact on our delivery to our ability to deliver services, and basically for us to be able to do our day job. So the strategic risk created by difficulties in the economy, we do have to kind of think about that in terms of the risk to the council. But as everybody probably knows, if there's a significant impact on the economy, we get more unemployment, we have more challenges for the community, that will increase the pressure on our services. So that's one area that we need to be minded of. We also need to think about, obviously, there is that strange tension between the council finding itself in a position where it may well be financially strained, but in terms of expectation of the local economy, local businesses and so on, they will want to see us investing in order to help the economy. So we have a real dichotomy there in terms of how we can manage to do that with reduced finances. So one of the risks is for us to look at our own investment decisions that always were designed to support the local economy. The other area is business continuity. Never has a strategic risk been so appropriate. We are quite experienced at East Lindsey District Council in dealing with emergencies, flooding events, mustard gas, a number of other emergencies that we probably deal with emergencies easily once or twice a year. But this is like nothing we've ever had to do before. We've certainly never been in a position where we are actually dealing with a response and a recovery potentially at the same time and in parallel, and having an anticipation that we dip from one to the other potentially over the next few months. And certainly a lot of scenario planning is looking at us being in that kind of position right through potentially till towards the end of 2021. So we've done an awful lot of mitigation ourselves in terms of supporting our staff work, how we continue to deliver services, but also, for example, in terms of the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum, which deals with emergency planning and supports our business continuity, that only last week stopped meeting 7 days a week. It's now meeting twice a week. So Gold Command was meeting every day and the Tactical Command was meeting every day. So a significant amount of work for all local authorities, police, ambulance, health and so on. So an awful lot of work going on there. The other area is health and safety. So primarily health and safety of our staff. So we've had to put a lot of measures in place. We have the majority of people working from home who are office based. We're following all the guidance in terms of health and safety for people like the waste and neighbourhood staff. Interestingly, now that we are looking at a relaxation of the government's measures for COVID-19, we're finding that we are going into almost a second phase of health and safety measures, which is starting to look a little bit different for our staff. The one area that after this we will probably be updating on is, because it's been discussed by the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum, is to add on business continuity an additional risk area, which is managing another emergency should that occur right now. So if we had a significant flooding incident in a couple of weeks' time, do we as an organisation have the capacity to be able to respond to that? So that's something that we've been looking at, how we would manage that in terms of our staff. The additional risk that we've added is around the office relocation. Again, looking very specifically at the risk to the organisation, for me with a particular focus on the risks around being able to deliver business as usual, and the impact on services in terms of that kind of move. We do I think coincidentally, but in the senior management team have quite a few managers who've actually done office relocations, both from the buildings aspect and from change management. And myself, I've done 3 office relocations over the years. So there is quite a lot of experience in how we would manage that kind of project. The other area that we will need to think about whether we include in the strategic risk register is then the strategic alliance with Boston. What we need to do is carefully think about whether that is a risk to us being able to deliver our services or not, in order for it to be included on the strategic risk register. Clearly that would have, if it goes ahead after a decision at council, would have its own operational risk register in terms of the delivery of that particular project, in the same way as the office relocation has a significant risk register operationally of its own. I think that's all I wanted to say. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. George, I think you've got a question. Is George there? Hello? George?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Two separate issues, if I may. First of all, in relation to the COVID and the finances, clearly the council have got a good handle on this, on a very, very difficult situation. So officers and members should be congratulated on that. But in relation to the financial risks to the council, does that include the various companies owned or controlled by the council, particularly I'm thinking in terms of leisure, the leisure facilities? Is that included in the calculations of the financial losses? That's one question which and it was already alluded to on the second part in relation to the strategic management, strategic alliance. Bearing in mind, as I understand it, the leader of the county councillors today has sent a letter to government asking for, as part of the devolution thing, restructuring. I think that needs to be referred back both in terms of the strategic alliance and in terms of the office, because there's a question of value for money and whether or not we want to look at that. It's nothing to do with the merits of it, it's just looking at the risks involved in terms of doing that on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Alison?
Yeah, in terms of finances, I'll defer to the 151 officer, but certainly the impact on MV has been taken into account. Adrian?
Yeah, that's correct. That's all I was going to say, Alison. Yeah, the £1 to £2 million that we're talking about does include the loss for Magna Vitae as well and leisure.
Yeah, and in terms of the strategic alliance, yes, you're right. At the moment, there's been a reignition of the discussion around devolution. I think certainly in the 10 years I've been at East Lindsey, this is probably around about the 4th or 5th time we've got to this position. So that doesn't mean that this isn't a good time for that to be considered. But I think we always have that at the back of our mind. I think it's not a place to go into it in detail, is it? But, you know, there are opportunities for strategic alliances at all sorts of different levels in a county the size of Lincolnshire. So I think a discussion around devolution doesn't mean that we need to stop looking at strategic alliances with other councils. And I don't, it's not a direct risk, I don't think, on that particular project at the moment. But you're right, it's something that's certainly in the ether. And then on Horncastle, yes, that will always need to be taken into consideration. I guess, again, if we were to stop doing things because of a discussion around devolution, there's probably quite a lot of things we wouldn't have done that turned out to be the right thing. But certainly Lincolnshire County Council anyway are really very, very interested in officers in Horncastle, expressed a lot of interest in putting quite a significant number of staff. It's an area for them where they have a preference for locating their staff because they find it very difficult to get staff to move out to the coastal area. So they're all kind of live things, aren't they? But you're absolutely right to say that they all need to be taken into account on an ongoing basis.
Thank you for that, Chairman. Only emphasising the business about the offices. If there is going to be joint working and merging of various functions, then that must have a material effect on what office requirements are needed. And therefore, you need to look at that both in terms of what East Lindsey have got and what Boston have got to actually get value for money.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Walter, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Alison. I think George has actually covered the point I was going to raise, and that was really about the Horncastle offices. Because I've looked at the description in Corp 001 and just compared it with what we said at the minutes on page 12, bullet 1, and I couldn't quite reconcile the wording because there doesn't seem to be anything in that description of the reduction of funding risk about the Horncastle project. But I think it's much wider now, as George has said. We've got to look at other things like the strategic alliance. But I just couldn't see the linkage. I couldn't see how the description in the minutes were reflected in the description in the risk. So you may just want to look at that, Alison.
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. The delivery of the Horncastle project is mentioned elsewhere, which is Corp 15, which is fine. But this is a different issue we're talking about. I just couldn't see any specific mention of the project in that risk description. But George has covered it. Thank you.
Purely from a financial point of view, you mean?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Walter. Any more questions for Alison? No, that was
just a point, Chairman, from me.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
Colin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick point there. Alison touched on the position between councils receiving money to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 and not the loss of income. I think the Secretary of State has made it clear that he doesn't see loss of income as something that he wishes to consider. So on that basis, we already know the numbers that the leader of the council has been talking about in terms of potential loss of income to the district council. How much risk is there associated with the government not changing their position on that?
Yeah. You want to answer that one, Adrian?
Yeah. When COVID first took effect, the music that came out of the government was do exactly what you need to do. We'll fund everything and make every shortfall that you've got good. So at that point, we're thinking happy days. We're not going to be affected by the virus. The government is going to step in and reimburse us for everything. Then they gave us a grant of about £108,000, where we got losses of between £1 and £2 million. At this point, there was quite a lot of lobbying because that money was allocated mainly for unitaries and county councils. 70 or 80% of the £1.6 billion grant they put into local government went to unitaries and county councils. And it was to fund things like the extra cost in social care, looking after adults, or children, all that type of thing, which was where the main cost was. At this point, then all the districts and boroughs said, hang on a minute, you're only looking at one side of the coin here. The districts and boroughs are going to be out of pocket by millions and millions of pounds because you're not looking at income. The government then issued another £1.6 billion grant. And in this one, East Lindsey got 1.4 million. So they had listened to the districts and boroughs a little bit, but it still went nowhere near to covering our deficit. And the mood music that was coming out of central government then was, we're all in this together. So they've moved their position from, do what you need to do, we'll fund it, everything, make everything good, to actually we may have to share the cost of this. So then that's what's prompted our response to this. And a lot of districts and boroughs up and down the country are now starting to, as are counties and unitaries, starting to get quite nervous that the government aren't in fact going to make good their promise, and that they've shifted the goalpost somewhat. So hence the fact that we've now had to produce a report, not had to, hence the fact that we have taken the action of producing the report that we talked about earlier for executive board and full council. So that's roughly how we've got to where we got to. I don't think that the grant funding that we've had so far, or will continue to potentially get, will be anywhere near enough to cover the loss, which is why we're looking at the remedial actions at the moment. I hope that answers the question. It was quite a long-winded answer, so I hope it's answered it.
Thanks for that, Chairman. Thanks, Adrian. I fully understand the answer. I think all of us, whether in national, local government of any kind, are going to face a long period of financial uncertainty quite clearly, and we should all try and find the most sensible solutions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just to support what Adrian has said, in the education sector, Adrian, that's what's happening as well. Obviously, a loss of income from students, and the mood music was all about support and so on. It's changed now to basically there is no more money for you. You'll have to manage somehow and improve your sources of income. Very difficult. And the only fallback is maybe a safety net for those organisations that are going to go bankrupt, possibly. That was the only saving grace. So it's no different here than, I'm just trying to give us some consolation that I think a lot of people are going through this pain. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any more questions on that? Thank you, Alison. That was a very, very enlightening report. Thank you very much. I don't think we have to make any, just note that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, moving on to item 16, monitoring officers update. Do we have anything to update? John?
No, I think I'll not put the members through any more than they've already been through this morning.
Thank you very much. Right, which gets us down to date of next meeting, which will be the 15th of, well, proposed 15th of July 2020. It may or may not change, but we'll see. I'd like to thank you all for attending today. I think it's been very interesting. We've probably actually done more debating than what we do actually when we're live. So it does go to show that there is something to this Zooming process. But thank you all for participating, and stay safe and stay well. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.